Hello everybody, this is Carm Killed the Cat, and welcome to your 12th C++ tutorial. In this tutorial, we will be going over classes. So, a class is kind of like the structures we learned about in last tutorial, but unlike a structure, a class can store functions as well as variables. So, declaring a class is also a little different. It's common programming practice to declare classes in a separate file, and so we can't just do it in the main.cpp file. So in Visual Studio, what we do is this. It'll probably be similar on most other compilers. So we click Add Class, you go to the Project tab, double-click C++ class, and we'll name this Player. So let me just explain this. Class name, it's just the name of the class. The .h file is where you'll be declaring all the variables and functions in your class. The .cpp file is where you'll be defining all the functions of the class. This we'll get into next tutorial. We'll also get into this, I think, next tutorial. And don't worry about these. This will come much later. This is kind of useless. So once we hit finish, we get two different files. So the number sign pragma once. You won't get this if you're not using Visual Studio, but delete it for now. You will need this, but I'll be doing a tutorial on this. I'm not going to explain it now, but you won't get that if you're not in Visual Studio. So if you're using code blocks or something, that won't be there, but delete it if you are in Visual Studio. So now you see class player, and then public, and then a function called player. Notice it has no return type, and a function called, I think it's tilde player. So what these are is this is the constructor and destructor of the class. So what the constructor of a class does is it kind of initializes all the variables and other things in the class. So it'll set variables to their starting values and things like that. And the destructor of the class will free up any memory taken by the class. We haven't gone over pointers, so you don't have to worry about that yet. Don't get rid of it though. It needs to be there. So let's create some functions for this class to have. So it's a player, so players move in a game, so we'll have void move. Remember to have uppercase letters for the start of your functions and variables in class. So move, int x, int y, so how much you want it to move on the x and y axis. Void rename, because this is going to have the player's going to have a name, just like in our struct tutorial. Standard string name. We'll have set position, void set position, and we need int x and y again. And we'll have int get position x and int get position y. There's a much more efficient way of doing that, something called the standard pair, but that's for a later tutorial. For now, just have two separate variables, or two separate functions that handle this. So these are all the functions our class is going to have. So notice the public here. So all these functions can be accessed from anywhere in the program. So as long as we have an instance of the player class in that scope, we can access these functions by doing player dot and then the function. But if we type private and then colon, anything in the private section can't be accessed anywhere except for the functions in a class, like these. So we can only access private variables from within these functions. We can't access them from main when we create instances of the class there. We can't access it from other classes. We can't access it from anywhere except this class. So private will have int m underscore, this means member, position. So just use m underscore for any private variables in a class. You could use it for a structure, but there's no need because they're all member variables. So, and then standard string name, or mname. So that's all the that's all the variables we need. So this is the prototype for our class. It's the declaration. So now we go to player.cpp and we can define some of the functions in our class. So let's define the destructor, or not the destructor, the constructor. So we'll set position to let's just do 0. Oh, we need position X and position Y because we haven't gone over pairs yet. So M position Y. You can declare, I've probably gone over this, but you can declare variables like this. You can do int and then all the variable names that you want to be of type int. So position X equals 0 and position Y equals 0. And we don't need to initialize name because by default it's just an empty string. So that's what the constructor does. Again, we don't need the destructor, but just to show you what it would do, we can just reset these back to 0 because the class is no longer necessary. Oh, and I should explain the constructor for the class. You never call this on your own. The constructor for a class is called when you create an instance of it, and the destructor is called when you either use the delete operator for a pointer, but don't worry about that yet, or the class goes out of scope. So you never call these on your own. So now let's define some of the functions. I'm just going to do some copy and pasting. Control C, Control V, Control V, get rid of semicolons. And we'll make these function bodies. Like that. And now let's define the functions. So move will have one thing I forgot, so that the program knows that these functions are part of the player class, you need to have player : in front of it. So just like we have standard : count or string or whatever, we have player : because the : is the scope operator, so it's in the player scope, just like count and string are in the standard scope. So player. Sorry, I forget to do that a lot. So now we have M position X plus equals X. So position X equals position X plus X. We're just adding X to our X position. And then we do the same for Y. Plus equals Y. And the user can also enter a negative value if they want the player to have their position subtracted. So rename will have name equals name. Set position, and position X equals X, and position Y equals Y. And get position X, we use our return types. Return position X and return position Y. So you can already see that this player class is much more advanced than the player struct. It has functions, variables. We're using different variables. We don't have speed and health anymore, but they don't matter. So now let's build this. It should run. I forgot a semicolon somewhere. Darn. Semicolon, now it should run. Perfect. But it doesn't do anything yet. So now we have to include a file here. This is how you use multiple files. And notice I'm using quotes instead of the triangle brackets. Oh, one sec. Sorry about that. So to include a file that you've made, you use include and then in quotes player .h. You need the .header file. So notice that we use quotes. Oh, I accidentally pinned that. Notice we use quotes instead of triangle brackets. I don't know why it doesn't just use quotes for everything, but in C, I think you use quotes for everything. I'm not sure though. You either use quotes for everything or you use triangle brackets for everything, but you have to use both here. It won't work if you try to use triangle brackets. So that's how you include a file that you've made. So now let's create some player instances. So we use player, column P1. Again, we need capital letters, P1, player, P2. So now actually, I've already shown you that you can have multiple instances, of an object. We don't need to worry about two again. So now let's do player dot, or not player dot, P1 dot, I'm sorry, I'm really bad at typing today, P1 dot rename, and we'll call him Bob. I forgot to put a get name function in our player class, but you get how it works. We don't need that. So you can see there, player 1, and then we have the function, and we name him Bob. So now let's do P1.move. Let's move him 5 on each axis. Actually, let's move him 10 on the y-axis. And then we'll standard count P1.get position x and comma space and P1.get position y. And I don't have the parentheses. I always forget to do that. And standard end line. So now we're calling player1.rename, really no point in that, and then P1.move 510. So and then P1.get position x and P1.get position y. And we should actually probably output this twice, once before and once after, just to show you that A, the constructor worked, and B, that it changed. So 0, 0, that's his initial position, and then once we move it, it's 5, 10. So let's now do P1.set position. We'll say 100, 150. And then we will output this again. Control V. So initial position is 0, 0. Then he's moved to 510. Then we set his position to 100, 150. So let's see, are there any other? So that's all the functions we've declared. So these are the basics of classes. We haven't done everything that has to do with classes. There's inheritance, there's polymorphism, but we'll get to that when we'll get to inheritance next tutorial, but we'll get to polymorphism after pointers. It's one of the most complicated topics in C++. So that's all for this tutorial. Again, inheritance in the next tutorial. It's when one class inherits everything from another class. So look forward to that. See you in the next tutorial.